Hilchas Tumas Tzara'as Perek Shishi. So we learned if you have a Tzara'as Be'era Basar, so it depends. If you have right away Simoni Tuma, which would be, for example, a Michya or Sair Lovan, so then that would be a Tuma, and he would be Muchla to be Tuma. If he didn't have any Simoni Tuma, you know, he had a Nega. The Nega was the size of a gris. But on the other hand, he didn't have a Michya, and he also didn't have any Sairus Lovan. So Memela, this Hezger. Then you see at the end of the week, if any of the Simoni Tuma, which for example, a Michya or the Sairus Lovan appeared, so then he's Tomei Muchlet. And now there's another possibility of Pisoyan, where it's spread during the first week. At the end of the first week, he notices that it's spread. So then, again, he's announced, then he's Muchlet Tomei, which means a Muchlet Tomei will learn Behemshech, so he has to go the whole process of becoming Torah. That can happen either at the end of the first week, at the end of the second week. Now, if at the end of the second week he didn't show any Simoni Tuma, so then the Poiter him. But on the other hand, if he comes back and now he has Simoni Tuma, so if he has L'moshel, Michya, and Sairus Lovan, so it's not a Chiddush. So obviously, if he has Michya and Sairus Lovan, so now he has Simoni Tuma, so Memele is Tomei. L'chura, there's no Chiddush. Masha'engen, the Chiddush is that if he has Pisoyin, so in other words, even though they were patered him, but since he originally had a Nega, and even though that Nega they were pater, but now when he has Pisoyin after the 2 weeks, so then that's considered also a Simon Tuma, and he becomes Muchlet. Now we mentioned already that this din of Pisoyin, which he has after they were pater him, is only if he still had the original Nega. But for example, after the 2 weeks, the Nega went down and there's no longer a size of a Kigris. So he doesn't have a Nega anymore. That Nega that he had, not only they were pater him because they didn't have Simoni Tuma, he doesn't have a Nega anymore. So now he's a person that has no Nega. Now when he comes along and he shows that he has a Nega, there was Pisoyin, so that Pisoyin can't be machchoilet him to be a Tomei, because it's just like you can't come betchila with Pisoyin, you come with what you have. So Aldero's over here, they start with Chatchila, so he has a Nega. If he doesn't have Simoni Tuma, so then they're Seger him again for a week, and then they see whether or not he has Simoni Tuma, etc. That's the Pashtus Hadvar. Now the Rambam is going to say that there are places in the body, which those places in the body don't have a musig of a Nega. There's no Nega which could be Matamiyu in those places in the body. That's what the Rambam is going to say. And the Nekudas Hadvarim is that first of all, there has to be a place which has skin. There has to be Be'er Habasar. If there's an area in the body that's not skin, for example, the nail, which is not skin, so that's not considered a nega. And also, the nega has to be in an area in the body which is revealed. If there's a part of the body which is not revealed, which is naturally not revealed, so then that part of the body is not mekabel tumas negoim. That's what he learns. Perek shishi. Elu mekemes ba'odam she'ein mistamim bebaharis. These are the places which don't become tummy bebaharis. Now, toicha ayin, inside the eye. There's an issue whether inside the eye the pshat is because it's a mokim shebeseser, because you take your eyelids and you close it, or is because it's a place which has no skin. I'll call upon teicha ayin. The din is certainly teicha ayin. There's no negoim, and also the teicha oizen inside the ear, and we're talking about inside the ear in the area which is not obviously visible, and the teicha choitim inside the nose, the teicha peh. And v'hakmatim shebebeten. So if a person has a large stomach, and those stomach, there are folds in the stomach, so inside those folds are not visible, so therefore they're not metami, bebeheres. And also v'hakmatim shebetzaver. If a person has a neck, and that neck is hanging down, so also those kmatim, those folds which are in the neck. And v'tachas hadad of an isha, the tachas hadad, and the Rambam is going to later on say that the tzir of the tachas hadad would be when the isha is being menika as b'no. So vice is then the dad is a little bit raised. So then, so the area which is not raised, that's called the tachas hadad, which is not mekabel tumah, which there's no tumah of bebaharis. And also beis hashechi. Beis hashechi is the armpit, and the kafar regel, the bottom of the foot, where you walk on, the hatzipeir and the nail, and also the harej v'hazok and sheyesh bem seir, the head and the beard, the part of the beard which has hair. So even though there's a spot in there which is a lovan, it's a baharis, but nevertheless it's the area which has the beard or the hair, so there's no simoni tuma. And also v'ashchin v'hamichva hamurdim, ashchin v'hamichva, which didn't start healing. So we learned before that there's tzareves ashchin and there's michyas hamichva. So then there is simoni tuma. Masha'enkin, if you have the murdim, in murdim there's no simoni tuma. There's kol elu amakem, is all these areas. Is ein mistamin b'negoyim, they don't become tummy v'negoyim. That's number one. In other words, there's a baharis in any of these areas so there's no din tuma bin goyim. And also ben starf bin goyim, they can become starf. In other words, if you have a nega in another area which is adjacent to this area, and you want to be mitzar of this nega to be part of it, so the din is ein mitzar from bin goyim. This part it doesn't become part of the nega, and to be mashlim the shir or whatever. And also v'loy hanega poishul l'toichem. There's a din that a nega, one of the simoni tuma of hechlet, is that there's pisoyin, that it's extending. So if you have a nega which is outside one of these areas, and now let's say you have a nega on the stomach, and now that nega extends into the area which is ben akmotim, which is in between the folds. So even though the chur it's extending, but nevertheless an extension to that area which is not metame ben goyim is also not considered an extension legabe pisoyin. And also ve'ein mistamin mishum michya, they cannot become tam mishum michya, which would mean, for example, if a person has a nega, and that nega surrounds an area which has kmotim, Now, the pale in the kemet, in the place where it's not visible, the place which is not visible, there's an area which is regular flesh. Regular flesh is a michya. So ein lechinam in this area can't be mistamim shum negoyim, but the nega is around this area. There's a nega around the area. You have, let's say, a nega on the foot. So the entire top of the foot, for example, maybe that wouldn't be a tzir because you have to see it at the same time. But the nekudas advarim is that there's an area around this place which is beis hastorim, and that area around that place has a nega, and now you want to use this beis hastorim not as a nega, but as the michya shebetecha nega, in order to metame the nega which is around this michya. So on that we say no. Ve'ein mistamin mishum michya. They won't become tam mishum michya. No, they can't be the michya which is betecha nega in order to be metame the nega. And also ve'ein mahapkin es ha'hefech kuli loven. We're going to learn later that a person that was tamei because of negoim, or even he was musgar, and then he became ha'hefech kuli loven. He became completely loven. So then that would be a siman tara. Ha'hefech kuli loven is a siman tara. Like we'll learn behamshach in the next part of the parak after that. So the Heifa Kuli Loven is a simantara. Now, Lepeil, it has to be Heifa Kuli Loven. It has to be completely covered with Loven. Whereas the nega has to spread in the entire body. What happens if it spreads in the entire body, but not in these areas, which we're saying is not Mistami Mishum Negoim? So then again, so these areas aren't relevant. In other words, whether they did spread there or they didn't spread there, in other words, spreading there doesn't make Tumah, and not spreading there is not going to prevent the gather of Tara of Heifa Kuli Loven. Ve'im mistam mishamichya, ve'im afkin hefer kuli loven. Shenamar be'er psari, that the nega has to be be'er psari. V'chol elu eine golu. All these things that he mentioned till now are not oir goli. They're not oir, which is begoli. Ela mehem sheini oir. For example, the tziperin is certainly not oir. Maybe the eye is also not oir. Ume'er mehen shehu oir. V'umechusa ve'ini goli. It's covered and it's any goli. For example, the folds in the stomach. So they're covered and they're not begoli. So therefore, even though they're regular oir, but nevertheless, since they're not visible, so therefore they're not included, not in becoming tamei mishum negoyim, and not mitzad the din of pisoyin into that area, not in the din of being a michya of that area around the nega around it, and also it's not negel legabe ahefach kuli loven. Then the Ram continues v'oidem hasvasayim, the red part of the lips is nidin kebeis hastorim. That's also considered kebeis hastorim. Legabi these dinim that we learned until now, and therefore ve'eni matam negoim, they're not matam negoim. The redness of the lips is not matam negoim. So even though the redness of the lips is considered mekemish begoli legabi other things, marshal the tefillah, you're not supposed to like close your mouth completely. That redness of the lips is supposed to be out. It's supposed to be nitpal in the mikval. That is, there could be hazoya. If the hazoya touches on that redness of the lips, so then it's considered that you had hazoya properly. That's not considered not mekemish begoli. But legabe, this din of negoim, the special psukim that we learn out, that these things are, the redness of the lip is also considered mekemis not shebegoli, and therefore they are not negetz hilchis negoim. So nachamot. So we're learning that there are areas in the body which are not mekabel negoim, which there's no din tumas negoim. If there's a beharis on that area of the body, it's not tam tumas negoim. And al derez are all the other dinim of negoim, of pisoyin and michya and hyper kulilov, and all these dinim is commanderless. It's as if it doesn't exist. That's the Nekudas Advar. And the Ram lists off all these areas. Halacha Beis. Now we learned that all these areas that he mentioned in Halacha Aleph, So they're not mekabel tumah, they're not bechlal begeder tumah, and they're also not negea to a hoifach kuli loven. When you have a hoifach kuli loven, you need that all the areas which could be mekabel tumas baheres, those areas have to become loven in order to have this din of nepach kuli loven, and memela that would be a simentara. Now there could be areas in the body which are different types of areas. For example, there's a Metzias called the Roish, which has no hair, or the beard has no hair, could be Makabal Tumah. They're different dinim than the Eira Basar. Al derazeh, if you have a Shchin or a Mikvah, which there's Tzereves HaShchin, Michias HaMikvah, so then also they could be Makabal Tumah, but they have different dinim, and therefore you can't like spread from one to the other. There's no spreading from the head to the beard, and al derazeh, no spreading from Tzereves HaShchin to Michias HaMikvah, as we learned before. Now the question is, what about benegeh hafach kulilov? And what happens? A person has a baharis in his skin, his regular skin, and now he was musgar. Now the din is that if it was hafach kulilovan, if he was hafach kulilovan, so then he becomes tor, because that's the hafach kulilovan is the simitara. Now does the hafach kulilovan have to be in the entire area, which is similar to the area which is the baharis, which is the skin? Masha'enkin, for example, the michias hamichva or the tzereves hashchin, were anyways over there, they wouldn't, pisoyin over there wouldn't be a siman tumah, so maybe the lack of pisoyin over there is not ma'akev, the din of nepach kuliloven. So that's what the Rambam is going to say in halacha beis, no. That even though there's any area which could be makabel tumah from a nega, even though it's not really an extension of this nega, because this nega is in the Eira Basa, and this is michias hamichva, and there wouldn't be pisoyin from one to the other. But nevertheless, since Lepel knows the Kafach Kulilovan has to be every area in the body which could be Makabel Tumas Nagoyim, even though it's a little different dinim than the Tumas Nagoyim, which is where the Negas began. And that Nega is now becoming Kafach Kulilovan. But nevertheless, that's Kafach Kulilovan has to be. So those areas which have no Shachas to Nagoyim, there's no Musias of Tumas Nagoyim, which are in Halacha Aleph, so that's not negate to the Kafach Kulilovan. But any other area, even though they have different dinim in Hilchas Nega, but nevertheless, it's neged. That's halacha beis. Halacha beis. Horeish v'hazokon, shenoshar kol se'orim, or v'hashchin v'hamichva, which are helu tzereves. Yidach metamin b'baheres k'misha b'yarnu. They each one could have tumah baheres. They ain't mitzdarf zeh, but the reish and the zokon are not mitzdarf one with the other. The shchin and the michva aren't mitzdarf. The zokon and the michva aren't mitzdarf. They're all not mitzdarf one with the other. And ein nega eira basa peiser l'seicham. If the nega eira basa a siman tumah is the pisoyin, if it's peiser l'seicham, that's not a siman tumah. And also the einon netamin mishum michya, which means, as we learned before, just like the michya of we learned before in the halacha aleph, that if you have a michya on an area which is not mekabel tumah, and that's inside an area which is mekabel tumah, so l'chura, let's say enochinami, a nega in that area wouldn't be makabel tumah, but lepil, if you have a nega around that area, and that area is a michya, let it serve as a michya. So we say no, say it's not makabel tumah, and say it can serve as simoni tumah, as a michya. Over here also, the one area can serve as a michya for the other areas. Just they're separate entities. So just like they can be pisoyin from one to the other, one can serve as a michya towards the other. So if you have, for example, a shchin, which that shchin, there's a shchin and there's a michvah. And now that shchin, which was b'teich ha-michvah, there was a michvah surrounded a shchin, and in this shchin developed a michya. In this shchin developed a michya. There was the michyas ha-michvah, which had one, it was a circled area. Inside that michyas ha-michvah, there was an area which was a shchin, which has nothing to do with it. But on the other hand, the michyas ha-michvah is a nega, which could become tummy, and you mainly just seger it because of this tumah. Now, if there would be pisoyin, it would be tummy, but if the pisoyin has to be in the michyas ha-michvah, not in the shchin. And who adin, the shchin can be a michya in the michyas ha-michvah. In other words, if that shchin marshal develops to become proper skin, so again, so that's the proper skin in the shchin can become the siman michya in the michyas ha-michvah. I'll call upon it. So I'll call upon him, but nevertheless, so even though l'chura they're separate entities, but nevertheless, ma'akvin is a hefach kulilovan. Whereas when you have a hefach kulilovan, so you have someone, let's say, had a nega be'era basar, and now we're saying so they will seger him, and now the question is, he's becoming tired through being Haifa Kuli Lavan, so it has to be every area in that body, in his body, which could be Kabul Tumah, even though it's not the same extension of the Tumah. And they can't really be a pisoin from this Tumah to that Tumah, because they're separate areas and they have separate dinim, but nevertheless, in order to have a din of Hafa Kuli Lavan, every area on the body, which could be Makabul Tumah, so it has to become Lavan. That's this din. As opposed to Halacha Aleph, where over there, those areas which Taka have no din Tumah, so they don't have to become what? Halacha Gimel. Beheres hasmucha l'reish ela'ayin ula'ezun u'kiyetzvam. This says areas which it doesn't have this gather of tumah, and therefore you can't have pisoyin from this beheres into the reish or into the ayin to the ezen. Oy, the beheres was l'shchin e'lemichva. So the din is tehera. So if this beheres was samuch to these areas, so he's tehera. Shenema v'ro ha'kenis hanega be'era basa, which means sheyeh kol shechutz l'nega be'era basa. The royal pisoin. Every area around the nega has to be a place which is royal pisoin. So the Raiva Taka argues with the Rambam. The Raiva says no, it doesn't have to be the entire area has to be royal pisoin. As long as there's one area which is royal pisoin near this nega, that's fine. Mashenga, the Rambam seems to be saying not like that. The Rambam is saying that the entire area around the nega has to be royal pisoin. So the Rambam says he starts off beheres asmucha l'reisha la'ayin. Now ayin is b'chlal not royal from the goyim, and oizen or shchino mikveh. If it's not shchino mikveh, which is soreves hashchino michyas hamichveh, it's lechura bechlal not royal in the goyim. Now that is a reish. If the reish has air, so it's also not royal in the goyim. So these are all things which are really from halacha aleph. Those things that are bechlal not royal in the goyim. What about if there are royal in the goyim, but they're not royal in pisoyin? So lechura there would be a makom to think maybe not. But the pil the Rambam fears is that every place around the nega has to be royal pisoin. It has to be royal pisoin. So if it's not royal pisoin, so then it can be makabel tuma. So b'kitzur, a nega and era basar has to be completely surrounded with oir, which has to be royal pisoin in order for that nega to be considered a nega tummy. Now l'chura there's a shtickle ha'ara that we learned before that a nega can't be poisa to these areas. Now, l'chura l'maynaf kimina. If you tell me that the nega has to be surrounded by these areas, so in other words, could you ever have a din where the nega can be posted to these areas? You're saying lepel a nega that's surrounded partially by these areas, so it's not a nega. So if you have a mashal nega which is next to, let's say, the shchin, or even l'chura tzareves hashchin, so say it can't be posted to the shchin or tzareves hashchin. So l'chur it's not a nega. So how could you really have this din that it can be poisel tzreves hashchin? I mean, once it can be poisel tzreves hashchin, so it's not a nega. But it sounded before like if there was to be soin was tzreves hashchin, it doesn't become tummy. L'chur it was never hezger in the first place. Now I saw that someone brings from achreinim that, and not like this shaila, but stamazay that this din is only betchilas hanega. In other words, when the kohen comes along and sees a nega, and that nega is next to a shchin or a mikveh or the roish, at that point in time, since the nega wasn't the eir habasa, it wasn't surrounded completely by eir habasa, which is royal pisoin, it never became tummy. But once the nega did become tummy, so even though now developed next to it areas which is tzereves hashchin, tzereves hamichya, so over there the nega didn't lose its din tumah. The nega didn't lose its din tumah because later on develop things next to this nega which you can't have pisoyin towards. And memela, then the din that you can't have pisoyin to these areas is negea. Knows then there's such a din that you can't have pisoyin to that area. Halacha dalad elu beharis teheris goy shohise be baharis v'nizgayer. When he was a goy, he already had a baharis. There's no musik of tumas negoyim by a goy, and then he became a ger. So that baharis which he had as a goy is not tummy. You know, the din of a baharis is only by the yid was neila the baharis. But mashenki by the goy, he already had a baharis, and that baharis didn't have a din tumah. So now the fact that he became a yid doesn't give it a din tumah. Al there is a hoise uber v'noilat. It was in the uber. He was in the uber. The uber is b'mei imei. So there's no din of baharis over there. It's not oir agoli. And now he was neilat. Now it's oir agoli. So it was already there when it was not begoli. Now it's begoli. Well, there is a bekemet v'nigla. It was in the kemet, in the fold of the body. And now v'nigla. So now this area, which was originally in the fold of the body, is no longer in the fold. And is open. Or beroish or bezokin. It was on the face and the area of the face or the head which you have here, kshahoy bem sayer, v'nikruchu, and v'noshe kol haseir, v'nizgal sabeheres. So now they are makabel, a head which became bald, or the beard became bald, and no longer a beard. So now there's makabel tumas negoyim. But originally the beheres was there without when it wasn't the time of tumas negoyim. Or hoise bashchin ubemichva kshehin mordin, and then v'helu tzarevis, and now it became tzarevis. Now they are makabel tumah. It started. There was already this beheres there before it started healing, and now it started healing. It started like a thin filament of healing. Is harei kolelu teheres. All of these are teheres. That's one case. V'chein im hoisa. So the din is nachamos. So the nekudas advarim is the beheres developed in the time when they weren't shaykhs to be making any tumah, and now it's still there in a time when they could make tumah. But since they were there before they made tumah, so memela they don't make any tumah. And v'chein over here is noch hachidush. Im hoisa beheres b'reisha bezokin kedem sheyalu seir meilo. It was in the area of the head or the beard where before he didn't have any hair, and then v'helu seir, and then he was malaseir, and at that point in time he already had a beard, and at that point in time there's no tumas beheres, and now v'halachaseir, and now again he doesn't have any hair. So it started without hair, now it's without hair, but in the middle there was hair. Oy, another situation, hoisa beheres ba'ir, was on regular skin, and Manasim became a shchinei michvah, and then that area became shchinei michvah, and which wasn't roy for beheres, because lepel was shchinei michvah that wasn't healed yet, obviously. And then v'choyu, and then they healed. Now v'arei and kei rabasa, now they're regular rabasa. There's aval bishat chilasa v'sefer tmeim. The original matzah was a reason for tumah, and the end of the matzah was also a reason for tumah. Aber heil v'hoisu teher b'intayim, since it was teher in the middle, so therefore arezu teher, therefore you can't call it tummy. Tummy is only something which developed and was here as tummy. Mashenkin something was in the middle. It was in the middle. It was a matzav which it can't become tummy, and now it changed the matzav, so again it can't become tummy. Now this din. Now normally we learned until now that be'emes all the maris negoyim have the same din. The only reason the Rambam asked before what's neged the maris negoyim, only to know the kohen has to know what mar it is. But in reality, as long l'chura, all we have to know is that as long as it's at least as white as the shell of an egg, kikrum beitza, and wider than that, that's beseder. That's negeh. L'chura is not negeh that changes. However, here there's a din that nishtanu mareim. You have a mara nega which was in a matzav that it wasn't shaykhs to be metamid. It was bikmotim. He was a goy. He was an uber. Okay, it's a bazar. Nishtanu mareim. Now the mara changed. Ben sheizu, they became stronger, or ben sheko, they became weaker. Is yiro betchila. Now they have to look. You look at it again. Ketzad. Goy shoyse be baharis kekrum beitza. La'achash in his gair is nasis kishelik, or fakert or shoyse kishelik. La'achash in his gair nasis krum beitza. So the din is tiro betchila. Now you have to look at it. If he had the exact color earlier, so now you can go ahead and be matami it now. But if he didn't have the exact color earlier, so even though he had the nega earlier, and earlier was wide enough to be matami, and now it's also wide enough to be matami, but since the level of whiteness changed, either it became stronger or weaker, so either way, it's considered a change, and now you rob betchila, and if he's royal tumah, you matami him. V'chein bekotten sheneilad, or bekemet shenigla, or bereishim bezokin shenikruchu, or b'shchin or michvah shachoy. All these din, the same din apply. There's all these cases that we said before, the kotten sheneilad, or kemet sheneilad, or nigla, or reish bezokin shenikruchu. It was originally in the face or in the head when there was hair, and now there's no hair, or b'shchin or b'michvah shachoy. It was originally on the shchin and michvah before they healed, and now they healed. So it depends. Im nishtan mare oisna b'horis is yiro b'tchila. V'im lav tehiris. So this is a new din. This is like the shinui, legabi, of the fact that this level of whiteness changed, is legabi that if it was there before, he was royally hitame, because either because he was in the kemet or because he was a goy, it's okay, it's bazeh, and now he's royally hitame, and the color changed. So then you're roy betchila, and then you could be mitame. Halacha hey. Kol sofik negoim. Every time there's a sofik, whether the nega is a nega, chutz mishnei sveikes shemaninu kvar, except for the two sveikas that we mentioned, which over there we mentioned, and the Rambam said that they were tummy. The two sveikas was if you had a person that had a nega, which was the size of a gris, and therefore, and they didn't have any simoni tumah, So he had Hezger. They put him in Hezger. Now, after the week, they come at the end, and they see now he has a nega which is the size of a cellar, which is larger than a gris. But he's not sure, the kohen is not sure whether or not this original gris now is the size of a cellar. He had it on his arm. He doesn't remember if it was on his right arm or on his left arm. So on his right arm, he had a kegris. On his arm, he had a kegris. And now on his left arm, he has a kesela. So he doesn't know if the pshat is originally on the left arm, he had the kegris, and now that gris became a sela. Or no, maybe the original one was on the right arm, and that gris went away, and this sela is a new sela. So when do we say that this is a siman tumah if the original nega became spread? Masha'ekin, if a person has a nega, and let's say he knows for sure, the person had a nega, then there was hezger, and then at the end of the week, the nega that he originally had went away, and now the nega that he has is a new nega. So then for sure, so it's a new din, and now there's a new hezger. It's not that's not called pisoin. It's considered a new hezger. So we learned over there that it's a suffix. So it's a suffix stomach. That was one suffix. And then there was another suffix that the din is that the seir lovin has to come behamsha to the baharas, and if the seir lovin came before the baharas, he's tor. So now if there's a suffix, if the seir lovin kadm baharas, baharas kadm will seir lovin. So the Ram over there also paskin that he's tummy, and over there the Ram said v'yiroli that tum is midrabon. Now these are the two sveikas that the Ram paskin before that they were tummy. Nachamo. Halachei kol suffix negoin. Chutz mishnei sveika shemaninu kvar tor. Actually, niskak betuma only if he didn't become tummy yet. So generally, all other sveikas he remains tor. Avol misheniskak letuma if he already was tummy. So now is a question to become tor is sveiki tummy. Ketzat. Shnayim shabo esel kain. Two people comes to a kain. Bazeh beheres kegris or bazeh kesela. Each one has a beheres. One has the size of a gris. One has the size of a sela. And his giram. So you put them both in Hezger. They both didn't have any simoni tumah, but each one had enough for Hezger. Now b'seif hashavua hoy bazeh kesela or bazeh kesela. Each one had a sela. So he doesn't remember which one had originally a sela and which one had originally a gris. Even it's the same person. So the person had he had two negoim. One was a gris and one was a sela, and now both of them are a sela. So he knows for sure that the one of the gris was pasa. Nevertheless, is a Torah. Why? We know for sure that it was pasa nega. So he knows that this person has a baharish pasa, but he doesn't know which one was pasa. So memel is harei Torah achiyeda be'ezen negatimi. So he should know be'ezen negatimi. So he knows, even though he knows that it's a possibility, he knows for sure that there was a pisoin, but he has to know which was the pisoin, which nega was the pisoin. And Kolshkin, if there's two people, and he certainly doesn't know if there was a pisoin on this nega, he doesn't know if this person has b'chavala pisoin. So then the din is that he's Torah. Now over here it's like more of a din vade. You know, the din is you have to, in order to make him tamei, it has to be that we know that this nega had a pisoin. That's the pshat. We have to know what's the nega that he's making. That this nega is having a pisoin. Halacha vov. Misheniska kletuma. But if he was already niska kletuma, so now it's fake tumah. So over there the din is that he's fake tor. Because the kohen doesn't know which nega is the one that had the siman tumah, and therefore the kohen can be matamim based on the fact that I know the kohen knows that he had a siman tumah. He doesn't know which one was the siman tumah. He can only be matamim if he knows which one is the siman tumah. Now misheniska kletuma. But if it was niska kletuma, it's fake tumah. Ketzad. Shnayim shabo esel kohen. Two people came to a kohen. Bazeh baheres kegris or bazeh kesela. Two people come to a kohen. They both have a nega. Bazeh baheres kegris or bazeh kesela. And then the his giram b'seif hashavua. And vari bazeh kesela veid bazeh kesela veid. So he knows for sure that shneim tmeim, because for sure both of them had pisoin. The one that had the originally sela only had a pisoin of veid, and the one that had the original kigris had a lot of pisoin. He had a pisoin, it became kesela veid. Now chazru shneim lias kesela. Now one of them became kesela. Shari holach hapisoin me'achad mem. One of them, both of them, now both of them have a sela. Originally, one of them had a gegris, one of them had kesela. Then both of them had a kesela v'aid, and now they both have a kesela. So they don't. Both of them don't have any more kesela v'aid. They only have a kesela. Aber heil ve'ini yedeh ezo. He knows for sure they were both tummy. Now one of them became Torah, because the one that had originally a seller, and then he had a seller of oid, and now he has back a seller, so it's halach hapisoin. The pisoin went. The other person still has the pisoin, because even though now it's a seller, but lepeil, he started off with a gris. So the pisoin didn't go. But he doesn't know which one. So one of them, b'shor l'chura, the simoni tumah went away, so l'chura he should be Torah. But he doesn't know which one. So memela the din is shneim tmeim, at sheyachzu shneim liyas kegris, until the shneim liyas kegris. Now, so we know for sure that by both of them will hold chap yisoin. V'zeu she'amru mishenizkat l'tumah. Once he was nizkat l'tumah, is sveik yitama. Then the sveik yitama. So is nochamal. When the person was originally, a question is whether he became tummy or not, whether he became tummy or not. So then we say that since he doesn't know, it's really not, he doesn't know how he became tummy. He knows which nega made him tummy. He doesn't know which nega made him tummy. So then we say, since he doesn't know which nega made him tummy, he can't be matami. He can't be matami. He knows one of the negoim l'chura should make him tummy, but he doesn't know which nega made him tummy, so therefore he can't be matami. Masha ain't came in the case where he was matami them already. They were already tummy vade. Now the question is whether the tumah went away, the pisoin went away, and we're not really sure because one of them started with a gris, the other one started with a seller, then they both had a seller of 8. So by one of them the tumah went away, but the other one we didn't. We don't know which one. So we had the din is the shneim tmei. V'chein mi shehoisa be'baheres u'bo seir lovan shekodem es habeheres, and now also he has seir lovan shefchasi habeheres. Ve'eni yadua zeh shekodem zeh shenepach. He sees this. There's two sets of Seir Lovan, and he knows he had Seir Lovan originally, which that wasn't a Siman Tumah, and now he also has another Seir Lovan, which is a Siman of Tumah. So, Imitech has Guinness topically, and others, he had a Beheres without a Siman Tumah. And now he had Hezger. He had a Beheres without a Siman Tumah because he had a Seir Lovan, and that Seir Lovan was Kadmul Beheres. And now he has another Seir Lovan, and he doesn't know really which one is the Seir Lovan. That's the new Seir Lovan. So just like we said before, when a person has two negoim, and he definitely had pisoyin on one of them, but he doesn't know which one had the pisoyin. So memela we say that he's not tummy. You have to know which one is having the pisoyin. So over here also, he definitely has a Seir Lovan, which is causing tumah. L'chur, it should be causing tumah. But on the other hand, he doesn't know which Seir Lovan is the one that's causing tumah, so therefore he's a Torah. That's talking about if it's Mitech Hezger and Memela he's Torah. Why? Not really Torah because of the Suffolk. He's Torah because a Suffolk can be Matami. A Suffolk can be Matami. He has to be declared Tummy. In order to become Tummy, the Kohen has to declare Tumah. And the Kohen can't declare Tumah unless he knows what the Tumah is. Not he knows that there is Tumah. He has to know what the tumah is. He has to know that this nega had pisoin, and he had to know that this white hair came as a result of the beheres. However, he already had white hair. He had white hair. He had white hair. He knows he had the same case. He had white hair before the beheres. Now he had white hair after the beheres, and the kohen knew which white hair was after the beheres, and therefore the kohen was machlitim. Now one of those white hair came out. One set of those white hair came out. Now the question is which ones. So if the ones that made him tummy came out, so he's Torah. If the ones that made him Torah never made him tummy came out, so he's not Torah because they had nothing to do with his tumah. So then is v'macher hechlet that he's a tummy. Aval b'isha halach seir echad. He knows that one of them went. Aveni that he's a halach. Him seir shal yasim tumah. Ayah seir acher. So that's this din. The din is in other words when you can't declare a person tummy unless you know why you're declaring that he's tummy. But once he was declared tummy, and now the question is whether or not he became Torah, so on that we say that unless you know for sure that he became Torah, he remains tummy. Halacha zayin. So basically there were two sveikas that we say lechatchili becomes tummy. There was a suffix whether or not the beheres was kadmul l'seir, or seir kadmul beheres. So there you have to understand, l'chura, there's a suffix whether the beheres kadmul l'seir, seir kadmul beheres. Nevertheless, he's tummy. L'chura, you're not really sure. The answer is, you're sure that this sar is a suffix tumah. You have to understand, l'chura, you have two sets of sires. One is definitely a siman tumah, and one of them is definitely not a siman tumah. So we say that since you don't know which one is the siman tumah, So neither of them is considered a siman tumah, even though you know for sure that there is a siman tumah. And look on this one, you can say there's a suffix whether it's a siman tumah, but we say no, since there's a siman tumah, the one is a siman tumah, one is not a siman tumah. Neither of them is a siman tumah, because you have to know that it's the siman tumah. If you have a baharis and the suffix, whether this baharis, the seir lovin was kadmul baharis or achar baharis, so again you have a suffix whether this seir lovin is a siman tumah. So no, yeah, and l'chura fakert, when you know for sure that one of them is a siman tumah, so it's like more of a suffix, like a chveses chazik yisura kilu. Masha'inkin over here, you don't even know if there's a siman tumah. Nevertheless, the din is not like that. The din is, if there's a suffix, you have to understand this din. Because if there's a suffix, if this baharis was kadmul seir lovin or seir lovin was kadmul baharis, so the ikir is yeah, this seir lovin, and the shaila is whether it's a siman tumah. We say misafik, it's a siman tumah. Even Masha'inkin, if it's a suffix which is a siman tumah, so then we say neither of them is a suffix tumah. It needs hezber. Halacha zayin. Mi shebo itzel hakeim v'ra shehu tzarech hezger a shehu potter. So he saw already. In his mind, he knew what the din is. But actually, his gire potre is nailed le siman tumah. Before he got a chance to say anything, so there was already a nailed siman tumah. Is zarei yachlet. So then he's yachlet. In other words, l'mashal, if he would have been made into hezger, if he was put into hezger, so then, since he was put into hezger, so memela, so until the end of the week, you won't really be machlet. But again, if he knew that he was potter, so if he would have potted him, and then he would have seen simoni tumah, so then for sure he would have been machlet him as well. That really wouldn't have changed. But the point over here is, if he was masger him, if he had a chance to say he's musger, so then we don't reckon zech with anything. Then we wait for the week. Masha'inkin, if he didn't say anything, and now there's simoni tumah, so then hariz yachel. For example, you saw a beharis, and the person would say he's musger, and lepel. Then there was a sar lovan. So sar lovan is a simoni tumah. Now, if he would have already said he's musger, so he wouldn't have made him a yachlet with the sar lovan. And then, for example, at the end of the week could be that sar lovan will fall off. So maybe he was never really muchlet, and he doesn't have to go through the whole process at the beginning of Mitzera. Masha'inkin over here, since he didn't say Yazgir, so maybe he became muchlet. That's this din. V'chenim bra'o sheyesh bi simoni tumah, v'kedim she'achliti v'yemeli tomiyato, hol chalem simoni tumah. So, im hoye betchila, im seif shua rishon, is Yazgiri. So then he's Yazgiri, because even though he saw simoni tumah, but now it's hol chalem simoni tumah. So memela, so he has hezger, either the beginning of the hezger or the extension of the hezger for the second week. V'im hoye b'seif shua sheni. Even though he saw simoni tumah, but lepel, since he didn't say actually that tamihu, he doesn't become tummy until he actually says tamihu, and since he didn't actually say tamihu until the simoni tumah left, so now he's either his seiger if it's still the beginning of the first week, or the beginning of the second week, or he's poiter if it's at the after the 2 weeks already.